Hello, dear friends. This is the letter of a song. In my unpretentious village, I have a bad reputation. Whatever I do is the same. Everything is considered bad. So I don't intend to do any harm by wanting to live outside the flock. People do not like that. One has one's own faith. Everyone looks down on me except the blind. It's natural. In the world, there is no greater sin than not to follow the standard bearer. Do you remember the poetry of the singer Paco Ibáñez? People do not like to doubt and investigate because it is very uncomfortable, since we come from a Catholic culture of absolute and authoritarian dogmas of obligatory belief and compliance. Opinion piece. Diversifying sources. It's wise to contrast all sources. Do not depend on the single source. There are sources that lie constantly. It's not good to depend on the single teacher. It's not objective to depend on the single school. It's advisable to compare all beliefs. It's advisable to diversify sources of income. Methodical doubt is the beginning of every science. This consists in not marrying with anything or anyone. The truth is a diamond that has many faces. Dogmatism is the imposition of certain postulates. All political dictatorships are based on fear. Barbarities are committed in the name of this emotion. Authority is in crisis because no one believes in anything. There is talk that the great world inflation is on the horizon. Scientific objectivity is incompatible with fear. The origin of all evil lies in fear and ignorance. The gateway to the dark side of the force is fear. Fear leads to the dark side because it's not compatible with love. I ask no one to believe in anything, but to accept it as a possibility. The statues of Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth in Canada are toned down. The price of electricity beats its annual record this Saturday in Spain. 31 vaccinated university students from Spain confined in a hotel in Malta. St. Petersburg's Achilles cut predicts Spain's win over Switzerland. US gains 850,000 jobs. Unemployment rate rises to 5.9%. A single tweet from Elon Musk sends the price of the song of Dogecoin soaring. US hands over its Bagram air base in Afghanistan after 2 decades of war. Let's start. One of the basic principles of journalism is to diversify sources of information to cover the widest possible spectrum of news data, and not to rely on just one source. That is what I try to do every day. That is why I check every day agencies, newspapers, and websites for important news, because the truth is a diamond that has many faces. The source of information is the origin of the data in a news story. It can be a news agency, an information office, a person related to the news event, or different organizations. From an academic, journalistic, or theory of knowledge perspective, an information source refers to information collected consciously by individuals or organizations in order to control, monitor, or document facts important to the individual or society. The information and telecommunication theory In the information and telecommunication theory, information sources are any source of information that can be represented by an analog or digital signal. In general, any physical magnitude can be represented by signals, as could be done throughout digitalization. The objective is to be able to process, store, or transmit the information that involves the alterations of the medium, as well as other diverse types of documents that contain useful data. But this diversification cannot only be applied to journalism, but it is also convenient to diversify the sources of income and investment, under the principle of not putting all the eggs in the same basket. And even consumers diversify their sources of information when selecting an article, since they increasingly resort to more sources to gather information if they have to buy a product. There are sources of information that lie over and over again because they are constantly giving dates that are never met. That is why I have stopped trusting sites like Restored Republic, Diner Chronicles, and Operation Disclosure, although from time to time I can pick out some published data that I find credible. I don't doubt the good faith of Jude Bington and other known reporters on currency realignment, but they may not be aware that they are being misled by their sources and may even be misinformed by the coalition to mislead the enemy. Never expect the truth to be told in a war for strategic reasons. Information independence. The same can apply not only to the mundane news, but also to esoteric or spiritual information, which comes in the form of channeled messages, teachers, or spiritual schools. Each message may have a few interesting paragraphs that I select, and also a lot of rambling literature. Each spiritual teacher can provide interesting teachings, but also take the spiritual teacher's own way. It is good to learn from all teachers, just as when one studies a career, but it is not good to depend on a single teacher, much less deify him. Each professor knows what he has researched, but ignores what he has not studied, because there is no such thing as omniscience in human beings yet. When contrasting different sources, one discovers that sometimes they coincide and sometimes they disagree. This discrepancy is usually the biggest problem, because it forces one to investigate who is right. And when one fails to find out, it generates distrust, doubt, and uncertainty, something quite frequent in any seeker of truth. But sometimes doubt is closer to the truth than any absolute statement based on a single source. We already know that living in doubt is very uncomfortable, but it is also the most honest thing to do when we do not have enough information. Methodical doubt. Methodical doubt is the principle of science. That is why when someone tries to impose science on us as if it were a dogma of a church, they are violating the principle of science itself, which is skepticism, and the right to investigate for oneself and draw one's own conclusions. This principle is much more violated when there are world organizations that try to be the spokesman of the absolute truth, as if it were the Vatican. Methodical doubt is a method and principle for arriving at the basis of certain knowledge, from which to start and how to base other knowledge of the world. René Descartes popularized this method in the 17th century. However, There are many notable and numerous writings and philosophers that coincide in similar formulations, not only in their content, but also with similarities, which strongly suggest that they may have taken them as a source of consultation and inspiration in his own philosophy. I refer to Descartes, René Descartes. Descartes states that this objective is to find certain tangible and factual truths of which it is not possible to doubt at all. Evident truths that allow to base the construction of knowledge with absolute guarantee. The first problem posed is how to find them, and to solve it, he exposes the method of doubt. In this method, the fundamental question is that of deciding where to begin to set the search. The answer at the first moment of this process of searching for true knowledge is the so-called methodical doubt, which consists of in discarding any unsure assumption which can be doubted. If this doubt exists, this assumption could be true or false, and wouldn't allow to build knowledge on it. Reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt is a legal principle that also teaches us to move throughout the jungle of uncertainty. Evidence beyond a reasonable doubt is the standard of evidence required to validate a judicial judgment in most adversarial systems. Generally, the prosecutor has the burden of proof and is required to prove his or her version of the facts to this standard. This means that the proposition that is put forward by the prosecution has to be proven to the extent that there could be no reasonable doubt in the mind of a reasonable person as to whether or not the defendant is guilty. There could still be a doubt, but only to an extent that wouldn't affect a reasonable person's belief as to whether or not the defendant is guilty. Beyond the shadow of a doubt is sometimes used as reasonable doubt, but this ultimately extends beyond that to a dimension that may be considered somewhat impossible. If the doubt affects a reasonable person's belief as to where the defendant is guilty, the jury is not satisfied beyond reasonable doubt. The precise meaning of words such as reasonable and doubt is usually defined within the jurisprudence of each country. Dogmatism. This principle of methodical and reasonable doubt is also violated when a researcher seizes upon a single theory to explain a phenomenon, as if it were the only explanation. If I have discovered anything, it is that each effect can have different concomitant causes that come together in a synchronous way, because reality is much more complex than we think, even if we try to simplify it. Dogma in the theory of knowledge is a set of beliefs that does not admit replication. It is a set of beliefs of indisputable and obligatory character for the followers of any religion, which is not based on internal knowledge, but on something supposedly revealed by an external authority of obligatory compliance and even punishable by burning at the stake in the Middle Ages. Dogmatism is a presumption of those who want their doctrine or their assertions to be taken as absolute truths. It is also a philosophical conception opposed to skepticism, which considers human reason capable of the knowledge of absolute truths. Scientific objectivity is absolutely incompatible with fear and manipulation, which explain the deceptions and errors that exist today. When one acts out of panic, one constantly makes mistakes, and the first one is to violate the freedom of the human being. That is why I dare to say that the origin of all evil is fear and ignorance. Fear leads you to the dark side because it is not compatible with love. All political dictatorships in the world are based on the exploitation of fear. And in the name of this negative emotion, barbarities could be committed. As we say in the Star Wars, the gateway to the dark side of the Force is fear. Dystopia. According to George Orwell, a society becomes totalitarian when its structure becomes artificial. That is, when its ruling class has lost its function but manages to cling the power by force of fraud. People do not know the value of freedom until it's gone. Freedom is made all the more precious by the memory of servitude. Do not wait until freedom is over to enjoy, value, support, protect, and make the most of it. Marcus Tullius Cicero. As the philosopher Gottfried Leibniz said, every feeling in the possession is the possession of a truth. I repeat it. Every feeling is the perception of a truth. He who has not tasted the bitter has not earned the sweet. All bodies are in perpetual flux like rivers, and there are paths that flow in and out of them continually. Modernity has been very important in freedom, but now freedom has become detached from truth, and freedom cannot stand alone without degeneration into license. License, in turn, is the ruin of freedom, for then, as Nietzsche and other philosophers recognized, all personal and social life becomes simply by the accession of power. In freedom, if freedom is to be secured, power and freedom itself must be accountable to truth. Or, as John Paul puts it, authentic freedom is ordered to truth. Personal evolution. There are many intellectuals who are trying, throughout the use of fancy language and words, to give us a clear understanding of what truth is when a child knows the difference, because he or she has better common sense. I'm not asking anyone to believe anything, but to accept it as a possibility if it resonates with them, and to discard anything that doesn't resonate with them, without denying the possibility of changing their mind in a certain point in time when more information is discovered. I don't think the same as I did a year ago, because I am a living being in constant evolution, according to the information I discover, and that sometimes make me change my mind. A person who always thinks the same is dead, because he does not investigate anything but clings to immovable dogmas. The dark side doesn't want us to investigate because we might question their fallacious assertions, and much less than everyone thinks for himself. Economy. Is a big global inflation coming? Fed Chairman Jerome Powell reaffirmed his central bank's intention to encourage a broad and inclusive labor market recovery and not to raise interest rates too quickly, based solely on fears of coming inflation. His words were as follows, in quotes: "We will not raise interest rates preventively because we fear the possible onset of inflation. We will wait for evidence of actual inflation or other imbalances," Powell said at a hearing before a House panel or committee of experts. US gains 850,000 jobs, unemployment rate rises to 5.9%. Job creation in June jumped more than 50% from the previous month as more people joined the labor force as the economy continues to recover. Wall Street hits record high on strong June jobs data. The New York Stock Exchange climbed to new highs on Friday, with the S&P closing higher for a seventh straight day after June employment data showed solid hiring but lingering weakness in the labor market that will keep the Federal Reserve from raising short-term interest rates. Gold prices rise despite dollar gain. Gold prices moved higher but remain range-bound due to a strong dollar. Gold faces headwinds as the dollar continues to rise. Since gold is priced in dollars, strong dollar creates resistance for gold as it becomes more expensive in other currencies. Dollar pulls back from extreme highs. The US dollar initially tried to recover a bit during the course of Friday's trading session, but then pulled back as the market may become a bit stretched. The dollar touched 3-month highs on Thursday, but traded within narrow ranges. A single tweet from Elon Musk sends the price of the son of Dogecoin skyrocketing. Elon Musk did it again. The price of the baby Doge cryptocurrency has surged 228% in just one day after the eccentric billionaire shared an amusing tweet. Sterling falls. Sterling fell on Thursday after Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey warned against overreacting to rising inflation in Britain. Jobs have yet to return in any major industry. No major US industry has regained its pre-recession employment level in the 16 months since the healthcare crisis torpedoed the job market as the nation approaches Independence Day. Labor shortage. US companies hired the most workers in 10 months in June, raising wages and offering incentives to lure millions of unemployed workers to sit at home, and a sign that labor shortages loom over the economy. Military news. US surrenders Afghan stronghold after 2 decades of war. The US on Friday handed over Bagram Air Base, its main military installation in Afghanistan, to Afghan forces, a crucial step in the final phase of the withdrawal of international forces as violence in the country grows. The rapid pace of the withdrawal comes as the Taliban insurgency intensifies its offensive across the country. While peace talks in Qatar have failed to make significant progress. Biden backs removing sexual assault prosecution from military commanders. The chairman of the corporation endorsed a recommendation Friday that military sexual assault prosecutions be removed from the chain of command and handed over to independent prosecutors to better serve victims. Boeing 737 cargo plane makes emergency water landing off Hawaii. A decades-old Boeing 737-200 cargo plane with 2 people aboard made an emergency nighttime landing in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Honolulu, Hawaii, early Friday. Both crew members were rescued. The pilot had reported engine problems and were attempting to return to Honolulu when they were forced to land the plane in the water. Other countries. Statues of Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth toppled in Canada. Protesters toppled statues of Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth II in the Canadian city of Winnipeg, as anger grows over the discovery of the remains of hundreds of children in unmarked graves in former Indian schools. Ireland rebels against Biden tax deal. Ireland has joined a rebellion against Joe Biden's global corporate tax deal as it seeks to maintain the low rate that has made it an European Union haven for tech giants. China. France investigates fashion retailers for concealing crimes in Xinjiang. French prosecutors opened an investigation into 4 fashion retailers suspected of concealing crimes against humanity in China's Xinjiang region. Chinese banks accumulate foreign currency at a record speed. The stock of foreign currency deposits in Chinese banks recently surpassed 1 trillion for the first time in history, and foreign currency flows do not seem to be slowing down. This situation, which worries many economists in the Asian country, is the result of a number of factors largely related to the health crisis. Spain. Historic drop in unemployment in Spain. In June, the number of unemployed fell by nearly 167,000 people. This is the largest monthly drop ever recorded, according to the Ministry of Labour. The price of electricity hits its annual record this Saturday in Spain. The price of electricity in the wholesale market will be 94.23 euros per megawatt hour on Saturday, July 3rd, an unusual level for a Saturday, a day on which industrial activity is considerably reduced. The Russian cat Achilles predicted Spain's victory over Switzerland. The famous Russian cat Achilles, the oracle of the European Championship in St. Petersburg, predicted Spain's victory over Switzerland on Friday in the quarter-finals of the tournament. The oracle cat approached the medal bowl next to the Spanish flag, and that was the sign. He's one of the most famous Hermitage cats of the many that have lived on the grounds of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg since the 18th century. 31 vaccinated university students from Spain confined in Malta. A group of 31 Spanish students are confined in a hotel in Malta after a passenger on the plane they were traveling in tested positive for the virus. Most of them had been vaccinated with the full vaccination schedule, as they were physiotherapy students and had worked as health personnel. For the time being, they will have to remain in isolation until July 10th. Actor José Sacristán National Film Award 2021. The jury of the National Film Award 2021 has unanimously decided this Friday, July 2nd, to grant the award to actor José Sacristán. Spanish America. Venezuelan police arrest head of human rights group. Police arrested Javier Tarazona, director of the Venezuela non-governmental human rights group Fundaredes, 2 days after he held a press conference in Caracas. Alleging links between members of the government and illegal armed groups in Colombia. He and the 3 others were arrested on Friday in the northwestern state of Falcón. Explosion near Pemex platform sparks surface fire. Petróleos Mexicanos, Pemex, underwater oil pipeline almost 80 meters deep, exploded a ton and sparked a fire some 400 meters from the state company Q-Sierra platform off the port of Ciudad del Carmen without causing any casualties. Earth at a minimum speed. The Earth crosses this Saturday, July 5th, the farthest point from the Sun on its orbit this 2021, an astronomical milestone known as aphelion, which takes place every year between July 2nd and 7th. And that's all for today. I wish you a weekend, dear friends.